Welcome, everyone, and very glad that you could join us today. My name is Paula Newcomb, and I'm the Northeast Regional Coordinator of the Indiana State Library's Professional Development Office. I will be the host and question moderator for today's webinar, The Many Hats of the Library Director, presented by Lynn Hobbs, Director of the Pendleton Public Library. After the webinar has been transcribed, it will be available on the Indiana State Library's Archive Webinars page. If you are watching an archive recording of this presentation, information on how to obtain your LEU is in the video's description in YouTube. For weekly updates on upcoming trainings and to learn more about what's happening in libraries across the state, please subscribe to the Indiana State Library's e-newsletter, The Wednesday Word, and check out our continuing education website for other professional development opportunities. Okay, so let's get started. I am now happy to turn the presentation over to Lynn Hobbs.
Well, good morning, everybody. Yeah, that's so interesting to see where everybody's coming from. I guess I didn't realize there would be people from all over the country, so that's exciting. Good morning and welcome to your new work week. Yeah, so I'm Lynn Hobbs. I'm the director of the Pendleton Community Public Library, and I'm going to talk today about the many hats of the library director. I've been the director there in Pendleton for 15 years, and of course, all of this is based on just my experience. That is the only director job that I have held. My library serves a population of about 26,000. I've got a staff of 16. So that kind of gives you a concept of about how big we are. We're considered a medium-sized library here in Indiana. So when I first took my job, I attended a Madison County Leadership Academy, and this is something that a lot of library directors do. They go to some type of leadership academy, whether it's something at the county or the city level where there are people from all different types of organizations that join, or it may be something that's very library specific that maybe your state library does or your state association does. It's a time to meet other people and really kind of hone some of your leadership skills, and they're usually led by consultants who love those icebreaker questions. And one of the very first icebreaker questions that they asked us was, what do you love about your job? And so what I really like about my job is the variety. I never know what the day is going to bring. And some people may not like that. So if you like to have a very predictable day, if you like to have a to-do list at the beginning of the day that may not be finished at the end of the day, that could be what a library director's day looks like. So just for example, me today, so obviously right now I'm giving this presentation. After this, I'm going to head into work. I'm in the middle of a construction project, so I'll be looking to see what kind of progress we've made in just the last day or so. This is the first day that we're opening the library for our next phase in our COVID reopening. So we want to check in on that, see how all that's going. I have to change the backup drives. I have to set some new hours on our voice over IP phone system. I have to transfer money. I have to advertise our board meeting. This weekend I was at Menards because I had to buy some black welcome mats that we could put underneath our hand sanitizing stations because you can't find drip trays now to save your life. So a huge variety of things that you do even just in the course of a day. And you may find yourself running and doing some things over the weekends as well. Now, that's not to say that there's no structure at all to the job. There are certain things that you're going to do every day. You're going to check your email every day. And there are things that are also very cyclical in the job as well. Right now we're in budget season, and January is kind of reporting season. So there are things that kind of follow the annual calendar to sort of bind it all together and give you a little bit of consistency. But there's definitely a lot of variety in being a library director. So if you're really attracted to the profession of librarianship, or wanting to kind of move up the ladder to being a director, chances are you can say goodbye to spending the majority of your time doing core library work. And by core library work, I mean reference and collection development and cataloging and the types of things that we learned in library school. A lot of what we do as directors are not the types of things that you were taught in library school, unfortunately. So typically, the larger your library, the more removed you will be from core library work as a director. And some very small libraries, you may be doing some collection development, you may be working the reference desk just because those are the staffing needs in your library. And then, in some of the mid-sized libraries too, you may be overseeing the person who oversees that core library work if you've got middle management. So it's not that you're obviously completely removed from it. I mean, that is the reason you exist, is to really carry out those functions. So you do have an involvement in making sure that they are done and that they're done properly. But as far as really having your hands in it every single day, day in and day out, that's probably not going to be where you find yourself being a library director. So I put this slide up here as just kind of a cliche because there are so many millions of quotes about being leaders and good leadership and all of that. And really, I mean, let's be honest, that's why we want to be library directors, is because we want to be leaders. We want to inspire people. We want to see the library kind of succeed under our leadership. And we have a vision of what we want to do and what we want to accomplish at the library where we are the director. But you can't just take the job as the director and then just dive in and think all of a sudden you've established yourself as a leader and you can just kind of impose this vision on your staff and your board and your patrons. You have to spend a lot of time at first just listening and learning and knowing, what is it that makes the library, succeed thus far? What is it that makes your staff tick? What about your board? How do they get along? So your vision that you have, these things that you want to accomplish, these initiatives that you want to launch, may not necessarily be in alignment with the library that you are the director for. And so that's something you want to definitely keep in mind. That's not to say that it can't evolve into being ready to take on some of your vision, but either maybe they're just not ready, maybe it's not something that's going to fit in with the community, maybe it's something they've tried before and it just didn't succeed. So you have to make sure that what you have in mind and your reasons for wanting to be this leader and this library director are in alignment with what the library has going on right now and the direction they're going to take too. And those are good questions, I think, to ask in in your interview with your board. There's always that opportunity in the interview where they say, do you have any questions? And I think sometimes we just have these questions sort of in our pockets. So we ask something because we feel like it looks bad if we don't ask a question in that process. But those are really good questions to ask, is what types of things do you see me working on if I got the job as library director? What are some of the initiatives you would like to see me launch? What is the vision of the library, at this point in time? And make sure that that's something that you think that you can live with. Now I'm going to start with some of these kind of no-brainer things, some of these things that you knew you were going to be doing as a library director, and that's probably part of what attracted you to wanting to do this in the first place. And the first is you're going to be doing the strategic planning. You're going to oversee where the library is headed, and if there is a plan already in place, that is where you start, because the strategic plan is really your North Star. It's not just something that you hammer out to fulfill an obligation, to check that box off and then let it collect dust on a shelf somewhere. If it's done well, it is what drives the library over the next 3 to 5 years, or however long of a time frame your strategic plan goes for. And so you want to make sure that that process that you take on is very involving and inclusive of your board and your staff and your patrons and the movers and shakers in your community, your non-patrons, your agency leaders, your school, anybody who can be involved in that process, to make sure that the plan that you have, again, is not just something you've created in a vacuum in your own vision, but it's really something that you've developed to best serve your community and your constituents. And then it's not just, establishing these are 3 goals that we want to do and writing those down and thinking you go and you just do that. It's much, much more involved than that. There are objectives, there are timelines, there are budgets. Here in Indiana, we have to identify community needs and we have to match them up with ALA service responses. There should be an accompanying professional development plan, a technology plan, an evaluation plan. So it is pages and pages and pages long. It can, I know a lot of libraries like to kind of put it on a quick little cool one pager, and I think that's great. but what's really behind it is very, very detailed. And that's something that the library director is very much involved in, the writing and the creating of that plan. Some libraries, of course, hire consultants to help with that, but that's not to say that the director is not involved. And then again, that is what guides you from that point on. That's what you will be working on. So you are kind of, not to say things can't change, but you should be somewhat tied to those timelines and those budget numbers, and who's responsible for the different objectives, so that you can meet those goals and make good on the plan. Because ideally, too, you've also advertised this plan, you've rolled this plan out to the public after it's been written, it's on your website, maybe it was in the paper, and you want to be held to that, because that's what you've identified as something you want your public to, or that the public wants you to accomplish. So strategic planning, your North Star. Don't just write it, do it. Another thing I'm sure you figured you would be doing as a library director is you're going to be a personnel manager in some way, shape, or form. Again, in a larger system, you may have an HR professional that works for you, but you will be involved in a lot of aspects of personnel management. Now, there's the policy piece of it. So you draft policy and approve policy with the help of your library board on things like your paid time off policies, the dress code. And some of these things might already be in place when you take a job, but a lot of those policies are so outdated because nobody ever looks at them, that they can be laughably outdated. When I took the job in Pendleton, our dress code policy was laughably outdated. And there was a list of acceptable dress and acceptable outfits. And one of the examples was long shorts with a suit jacket. I don't even know what that is. I can only picture like Angus Young from AC/DC. I think he wore like long shorts and a suit jacket. So, when you get there, you're going to look at some of those policies, and not only is it going to give you some information of some things that need to be changed, but kind of where you can go from there. So the policies are one thing, but there's so much more beyond that. And your staff is your number one asset. They are your most important asset, and so they take the most time. They can be incredibly rewarding when they do great, and they can be incredibly frustrating when they don't. So you can really ride a roller coaster with managing staff. But managing staff is really how you hone your own leadership style. It's not just about the strategic plan and running the library. It's about managing the people and your team. And so you need to take time to let your management style develop in a way so that it's very genuine, because nobody wants to work for somebody that they think is a phony. And not everybody is going to like you no matter how hard you try, but try hard and get to know people. And that's I know a whole other session on how to really effectively manage people, but take the time to do it and do it well. The challenges, they may really surprise you. You will be involved in conflict resolution. You will be having those difficult conversations in your office. You will be giving evaluations, whether they're more formal evaluations where you're writing something down and giving people scores and goals and all that, or maybe it's something that's a little more casual where you're meeting, just once a month for a half an hour. It's still an incredibly time-consuming process, however you do it. And again, it should be done well. It's not just a formality. It's something that if it's done well, it can be very meaningful and can help to move the organization forward. You're also going to be, coming up with the overall organizational structure of the library, and that can change a lot. As people leave their positions, there may be opportunities to restructure some things so that they work a little bit more effectively for you. You'd be in charge then of salaries and assigning salaries and benefit levels, and of course hiring and firing. And firing is never fun. I mean, it no matter how cut and dried it may be, even if there are days, you almost pray for gross misconduct because that somehow makes it easy. But it's even with that, it's never easy. I mean, there are tears and there can be anger, and you come home at the end of that day and you just don't feel great about it, even though it was justified. So it can really be an emotional roller coaster managing staff. But again, it's time consuming, and it has to be done and done well. Oh, facilities. My facility is about 28,000 square feet. I have geothermal. I have 5 different mechanical rooms. I'm looking at getting solar now and a generator. So I've got a boiler. I've got VAV boxes. I mean, I don't even know what half of this stuff is. And that's what makes it so challenging because we are librarians. We are not electricians. We are not plumbers. We are not HVAC professionals. And yet we are charged with making sure that the overall facility is in good working order, as well as the library's budget is healthy and sustainable. And that means that we can't be taken advantage of by people who come in to take care of something that we really don't know anything about. It's kind of the old, if you're, Seinfeld fans, and George has something wrong with his car, and he says, you bring it into the mechanic, and he says, oh, I need a new Johnson rod, and he's like, okay. That's kind of what this can feel like sometimes. So it's important that you hire well. And whether that means you're hiring somebody who's actually going to be employed at the library as a facilities person, or that it is an outside organization that you're bringing in to serve the library. You can kind of interview those people too. I mean, they're going to be working for you. You will be paying them, and you want to make sure that you can trust them as much as you can. But ideally, you have somebody on your staff who can advocate for the library that has that can kind of be almost a translator between you as the library director and the professionals that are servicing the building, because that communication disconnect and that knowledge disconnect, because it's just not our wheelhouse, can be really, really tricky. We want to do a good job. Obviously, we don't want to get taken to the cleaners, and so that can be really difficult. And so many things can happen. Oh my gosh, so many things can happen. Let me give you some examples of some things I've had. I'm not trying to scare anybody. I don't know if some of you are already library directors and have had some of these experiences, but even if you work in a library, you would probably be aware of this type of stuff that goes on. I had a Friday night. I was home already. Library closes at 6 o'clock, and I get a call from my staff that the front door won't close. Just won't close. It was a super windy day. I think probably they opened up the door and the wind just kind of took it and bent something, and they couldn't get the door closed. Well, obviously, I'm not going to have them stay there because it's my responsibility now. So I have to drive back to the library and basically keep watch at the front door that won't close while I call some kind of repair person, a door guy in, of course, paying, through the nose on a Friday after 6 o'clock to have them come and fix my door. I can't fix the door, but it's my responsibility to make sure that nothing happens to the library while the door is wide open and that I get somebody there to fix it. So, that's not a fun Friday night. And I didn't have a fun day after Christmas a couple of years ago when I got a call from Corson, who is our fire and security company. They told me I had a trouble on my system, which usually means it can wait until the morning. And then 2 hours later, I had a general fire alarm. And so I had to show up on what was literally the coldest day of the year in the middle of the night, go to the library and wait for Corson to come and install a new air compressor back on my sprinkler system. And while they did that, they had to empty out the sprinkler system and discharge all of the water, which goes outside right at my main entrance. So at 4 o'clock in the morning, I'm salting the main entrance because I can literally hear this water freezing because it's so cold. So, I mean, those are just two examples of things that have happened. I've spent the night at the library on more than one occasion. We've had ice damming and leaking, and we just had our parking lot paved, and the paving truck hit our garage. So now I've got a major repair on our garage. So that's the kind of stuff that you have to deal with. And it can be really stressful to deal with it because it's not what you thought you were going to be doing. You thought you were going to be leading the library, not getting your garage repaired. If there are any questions or anything, feel free to type them in the chat. Obviously we're saying we have to be all flexible and all that kind of thing. So I'm certainly fine You're not interrupting me at all if you have any questions or any comments that anybody wants to make. Okay, public speaking. If you don't like public speaking, library directorship may not be for you. There is a lot of public speaking. I have been before the county council, the town council, the school board, the Kiwanis. I've been on local radio. I've been on local television. I taught a class at IUPUI once. That was pretty fun. So you never know when you may find yourself in front of a group of people, large or even just a handful of people, to talk about the library. And your business before these people can vary. You may be before your county council because you're asking for approval on a bond, and those can be kind of scary things because they're really, really critical that you get that bond passed, and your performance at that meeting and how well you know your project that you have planned and how well you know the numbers and how that's going to affect your taxpayers can really either make it or break it for you. Sometimes you may be going before a group like when I was before the Kiwanis, just to promote the library and just talk about the kinds of things we do. Hey, if you haven't been at the library in a long time, here's the kind of things we have going on. So no matter what the purpose of your presentation, always have a smile on your face because it is your face forward out there. Always make sure that you're prepared and polished. And it's not just, those other kinds of outside duties, although that kind of does touch upon a lot of the outside duties that you have as a library director too, going to conferences and roundtables, and you're not always in your office, of course. But your own board meetings, I think, is also a public speaking engagement to some degree. You are before, most of us have 7 board members, and of course they are open door meetings, so the public is invited. Some of you may have the public at your meetings. If something's going on, you may have several people from the public at your meetings, so you always have to be really on your game, really prepared and articulate. And also, when it comes to your board meetings, I want to take under this slide just a little bit of time to talk about your library board. Now, the board meetings themselves require a lot of preparation. Of course, you have to get your agendas out and your advertisements and your director's reports and all of your financials and your cash flows and secretary's reports and your resolutions and all of that paperwork ready to go. Ideally, you have it to them in advance of the meeting. But the board itself and the makeup of the board itself and how they function can make or break your job satisfaction. If you have a fantastic board, and I right now have a fantastic board, I am so incredibly fortunate I can do my job. They are mindful in our meetings in that they ask good questions. They challenge me when I need to be challenged, but they don't overstep. And I've heard, unfortunately, too many horror stories from other library directors out there who really struggle with their boards, and mostly because they are overstepping. They're crossing that line between governance, which is their duty, into administration, which is your duty, and getting their hands in the day-to-day operations of the library, which really they're not supposed to be doing. And it can make your life miserable. It can make it feel like they're out to get you, or that they're waiting for you to trip up, that they're watching every little thing you do, that you're going to lose your job. So that is something that you obviously don't want to be in a situation like that. You can have board members that are not at all supportive of the library. I have heard of board members that try to get themselves appointed so that they can actually cut library budgets. And you may have boards that are completely dysfunctional. Maybe there are some members that don't get along, they're not cohesive. So there are a lot of things with the board that can either make or break your job satisfaction. So again, when you have that job interview, when you have some of those opportunities to ask questions, you might be able to ask some questions of the board to glean sort of how they function and find out if this is a board, that you think that you can deal with. Ask what the support of the library is like on the board, what their evaluation process is for the director, or anything like that that may kind of give you sort of some red flags that this may not be the group of people that I want to work with. Now, boards are not there forever and all eternity. You may have one person that's maybe the real problem on the board, and then maybe their term expires and they leave, and then you get somebody else in, and that changes everything. So it's not to say that it can't be changed for the better, but if you go in and the chips are stacked against you at the board level, that's an obstacle to really get over in the first few months and years on the job. So I'd like you to have an easier start than that. You will be a number cruncher. So I didn't necessarily grow up in math. I was more of a liberal arts kid, I guess. I liked my literature classes and English and band and that kind of thing. I was not algebra, trigonometry, anything like that. So I didn't necessarily think that I would necessarily be good at this part of my job. However, oddly, it's really fallen into place for me, and I love doing the library's budgets. Um, there can be some pretty advanced math that you're doing, and that's not to say there's not help out there. A lot of libraries have business managers and bookkeepers that are dedicated to that, and that really is their wheelhouse. Some libraries employ an accountant to help with the budget process, or sometimes even the library attorneys can help with some of the numbers. But it's not just the budget. I mean, the budget is a big, big piece of it. You need to be aware, first, really, of how the budget works. And this is not something that you can just learn overnight. It's not something even that you can learn in a year. I mean, it takes years to be comfortable with the budget process. Budget processes change. Of course, I know we have people from other states here. I'm sure all of their processes and forms and rules and regulations are different. So if you're coming from another state and coming into Indiana, I've heard that Indiana's budget process compared to other states is incredibly complicated. It can change from year to year. We've got a new form, not a new form, but the form has been redesigned. They change names, they change acronyms, they change laws. So you really have to be on top of the budget process and make sure that you understand it rather than just passing it off on that bookkeeper or accountant, even though maybe they've done it. They've always done it. The previous director maybe just always had them do it. They did the overall spending plan, but then passed the actual paperwork and the forms onto that accountant. Well, when you do that, you don't then have a full understanding of what goes into the budgeting process. You don't understand your revenues. You don't understand your cash flows because you just don't have your hands in it. So I don't think it's a good idea just to scratch the surface of the budget process, but rather really dive in, because ultimately it is your responsibility to make sure that the financial health of the library is good. And it's also important too at the top level there that you are somewhat in tune of what's going on in the local economy. Because if you have people moving out of your area, or the real estate market is bad and the unemployment rates are going up, and whatever may be happening, it's that's something that can affect your revenue, and you need to have them reflected in your spending. And if you're not paying attention, you can get yourself in some trouble there. So I really, really think you need to learn the ins and outs of your budgeting process. But it's not just budgets where you're going to be doing numbers. I mean, a lot of it, of course, is trying to save the library money, but salaries, for example, we talked a little bit about the salary schedules and the amount of time that can go into that process to make sure that it's fair and that it somewhat aligns with other libraries of similar size within a similar geographic region. And crunching those numbers and making sure that what you're offering is fair can be really time consuming and advanced math. You will learn Excel. If you don't know Excel, you'll learn, because it can be pretty great for a lot of this. And then, things like quotes that you get for insurance. You'll have to evaluate those, obviously, financially. And it's not necessarily just this one's the cheapest. That one may be the cheapest because it's missing a particular type of coverage. So you're really comparing some of those things. We did an LED conversion project at the library that we managed rather than bringing in any kind of a consultant. And that was way complicated. looking at, counting all these light bulbs, which I know seems like, well, you can count, right? Well, yeah, you can count. But then the lumens and how much energy they use and how long they burn and all this kind of thing. And you're doing all this math to figure out, which is the best one, which is going to give us the most bang for our buck, was wildly complicated. And even down to shelving. We're in a building project right now. We're relocating some of our collections from one area to another on new shelving units. So we're doing linear measurements of collection space to see how much they take up, and then seeing how much space we have available on the shelf so that we know how much, how many inches of empty space to leave at the end of every shelf. And if we miss those calculations, you're going to end up with a quarter of the collection that you can't place, and then you're shifting, and maybe you messed it up so bad that you don't even have enough room on those shelves at all. So it's not just about budgets and financial stuff. There's just a lot of math, I think, in the job in general. There's a lot of reporting, and you may have somebody who takes care of some of that for you. But again, it is ultimately your responsibility to make sure that those things go in and they go in on time. That's the thing. It's those deadlines. My calendar is peppered with deadlines through the entire year for various reports, and just things that need to be done every single month. I'm going to just rattle off some things that we have to do just so you get an idea. So this is just a long list, so you can be like, whoa. There's the 100R. There's the annual financial report. There's the other post-employment benefits report, the state library's annual report. There's the quarterly plaque report. Twice a year, we have to send a list of addresses to the treasurer in case they have to collect back taxes on any of our employees. There are workman's comp reports. If you have any grants that you need to report back, you do that. You do annual and monthly engagement uploads for the budget, where you have to upload your secretary's reports and some of your financial information for the state. You've got your, I may have mentioned already, your director's reports and your board meetings. So that's a lot, and that's not near all of them. So ideally, somebody somewhere in the library where you are going to be director, or you have maybe just started being a director, has made a list of all of those and when they need to be in. I would highly advise that you start to keep a list of those when you are the director, so you don't miss those deadlines, because that's the kind of stuff that can get us in big trouble. And if we're not paying attention, we're going to miss deadlines, we're going to miss reporting, and then we might get dinged in an audit and things like that can really kind of tarnish the reputation of the library. We certainly don't want to do that just because we've missed a deadline. So make sure you have all of those deadlines in your calendar, even 2 weeks before they're due, so that you're sure that you have the time to pull that report together, and you don't just see like, oh, that's due today, but that's going to take me 3 hours to pull that together. Give yourself plenty of time to make sure you can get that stuff submitted. And just an overall pay attention, go to stuff. Ideally, you would have a colleague that you can call and ask questions, that you can kind of keep each other on task and make sure that you're accountable. Or you go to things that your state library puts on, or that your local federation puts on. Whatever the training opportunities are that are out there for you to know what your obligations are from a legal standpoint and a budgetary standpoint. You as the director need to be in on that for sure. So this is my last slide. I could have made it a fireman, I guess, because we are always putting out fires. Ultimately, the buck stops here. And that may be why you want to be a director, but that may also be why our stress levels can be incredibly high, because it seems sort of like we never get a break. And I can give you some examples of some unexpected wrenches that we've had at the library. I got a call in the middle of the night, surprisingly not from Corson, which is usually who calls me in the middle of the night, but from our local police, because a drunk driver drove into the library. Now, luckily, there wasn't a lot of damage done to the library, except for some landscape, a little bit of paint transfer on the building, but they left the car there. And so I had this, they were like, we're going to get it out of here, but I just want you to know when you show up to work in the morning, there might be this car, that ran into the library. And then the guy led him on a foot chase around the library. So when I got there in the morning, I could see all these footprints, around the library. So that was like an episode of Fargo or something like that. There was a time that I actually wasn't at the library and something happened. I was in Russia on a vacation. This was 2009. And the police chief came into the library and talked with my circulation manager and said, where's the director? And he said, she's in Russia. And he says, no, really, where's the director? She's really in Russia. So after he finally convinced the police chief that I actually was vacationing in Russia, because after all, who really does that? Well, there had been a chemical spill at the pool. Our library is just adjacent to the pool. I can actually hear the lifeguard in my office. And so they had a chemical spill at the pool, and we had to evacuate the library. I was completely unreachable. So I was glad that somebody else was able to handle this. When the chief of police walks in and says you have to evacuate the library, I guess that's just a no-brainer, and they knew what they needed to do. So you can't always be there. Things do ultimately fall on you, but there will be times that you are simply unreachable. I'm a musician, so when I'm out, playing, if I'm in a concert or even in a rehearsal, I don't have my phone on me. If something happens, it's something else is gonna, somebody else is gonna have to take care of it. And I'm glad that I do have some good people who are second, third in command there, and that they know in what order to call. So make sure that you have, again, it all comes back to hiring well, but make sure that you have someone who can kind of function as an assistant for you to take care of some of those fires if you can't. Then, you might have a patron get injured. You might have, I had a patron get injured trying to get some chairs out of the stacking chairs in the community room, and the stack was too high and it fell. Well, then they didn't report it. And then a month later, they said that they were starting to have some problems and, they wanted to report it. Well, at that point, per our policy, it was too late. And then another person was trying to encourage me to send a letter to them just to apologize that had happened. And I was like, I don't think that's really in the best interest of the library to do that. So you just can have weird things happen. You got to always be on your toes. But then there are sometimes you have to kind of laugh at it. I went out once and the flagpole, the flag was on the ground, which is terrible. I'm like, oh my gosh, why is my flag on the ground? Well, what had happened is the loop, the little eye hook or whatever that's at the top of the flagpole that the rope goes through, had rusted out. So, typically if the rope breaks, you get a new rope, and then maybe the fire department will come out and they'll, rope it back up there for you. Well, I needed a welder and a bucket truck. So where am I going to find that? I didn't even know who was going to fix that. So, sometimes you just have to throw your hands in the air and kind of laugh at it. Ultimately I did get it fixed, but it wasn't something that needed to be fixed that very day. So I was able to take the time and not let it stress me out too much. There was another time I was having a very stressful day. It seemed like everything was going wrong. Every time I turned around, something was breaking down or whatever. And I was in my office, and my high school page comes into my office, and he says, hey, so the vending machine is giving out free Butterfingers. And I said, well, what do you mean? He says, well, you don't have to put any money in. You just turn the knob and a Butterfinger comes out. And I just said, well, you know what? Free Butterfingers for everybody then, because I'm not going to mess with that. I'm not going to call in a repair. I'm not going to start throwing elbows at these teenagers getting their free Butterfingers so I can open up the machine and, take all the Butterfingers out of there. Big deal. I'm going to lose out on $6 worth of Butterfinger revenue, and the kids are going to be excited that they're getting free Butterfingers. So sometimes you just have to, understand, just laugh it off if you can, if it's not an emergency, if it can wait, if you can find the humor in it. That will really help you to keep your sanity and keep your stress levels in check. That's kind of about all I have. I don't know if anybody has any questions or anything that they want to bring up.
So far, it's been very quiet, but it's probably because I said we're holding off questions till the end. But I have questions.
Okay.
What most surprised you about becoming a director?
The facilities. The just that there is always something going on with the facilities. No matter how well you manage them, it's every day it seems like there's something. And whether it's and here's something too that I think is important for a director to kind of humble themselves a little bit. When the toilet overflows, you are not above plunging that toilet. So I joke around whenever I take out a toilet plunger that I am a director of the people. So, you need to get your hands dirty sometimes too in some of that facilities work. But it just seems like, it's kind of like in your house. It's never perfect unless you just built it and finished a punch list. There's always a scratch on the wall somewhere, or a hinge that needs to be greased somewhere. And there's always something. So the facilities, that's a quick answer for me.
Okay, I see someone else typing, but I have a few more I thought of. How about how long did it take you to be comfortable being a director?
I would say so. I had an interesting situation because when I first started being the director, we were right starting a building process. Like we had our pre-bid meeting for our contractors my first week on the job. So I was thrown into a construction project straight away. So I felt like I was just more overwhelmed with that. And so I would say 3 years. If I had not had a building project that I was also managing at the time, I probably would have been comfortable, I would say, in maybe 2 years. Now, I was not comfortable with the budget process in 2 years, but I was comfortable with my staff. I was comfortable with the facility. I was comfortable with the community and my board, the policies we had in place, and just kind of what was going on, but definitely not the budget. The budget, I would say, took me um, at least 6 years to feel comfortable.
Okay, and I had others. You kind of already touched on these. I was thinking about who would you go to ask for help? You already mentioned State Library, Indiana Library Federation. How about mentor? Did you have a mentor in the beginning?
Um, I didn't really have a mentor. Now I had a business manager who was very knowledgeable just about, mainly the business end of the library. So the budgeting and the reporting and things like that. So she was my mentor in that way, and that she really kept me on track and knew what I needed to be doing and taught me a lot. But I didn't really have another library director who was a mentor. Now I have colleagues. I wouldn't necessarily consider them, mentors, but I've got great colleagues that I trust and that I can call on if I've got a tricky situation with personnel, or, a lot of what libraries do, there are legal repercussions if you don't do them right. And so that can make us very nervous. And so, yeah, the state library, the Indiana Library Federation, an attorney, if you have a board attorney, can also be really helpful, as well as colleagues. And, like COVID obviously has been an incredible challenge in so many different ways. And I mean, even just going back to the policies of being a personnel manager, many of us now have pandemic policies that we had to come up with, and all these questions about COVID. What do I do when a staff person gets sick? And, what am I legally allowed to ask? And what am I legally allowed to tell people? And all of that, we've all been thrown into that. And again, the State Library, Indiana Library Federation, have been absolutely fantastic in giving us help.
Right. And you also mentioned talking to other directors. Like we do have a lot of different roundtables that meet our counterparts, so that's great. So I know we've got lots of really good groups like that around.
Yeah.
We do have someone else put a question in there, Kimberly. What advice would you have for someone who may want to be a library director someday? Any tips or things to look out to try before trying for that role?
I would say take up any training opportunity you can right now that is going to help dip your toes into the management waters. If you're not a manager now, especially, because if you go straight from being like a frontline librarian to a director, that's a big step. So maybe there is some kind of a leadership academy, that you could be in, or even just take a series of webinars that might be on personnel management. So if, your boss, I hope, would let you attend those things, start going to professional development opportunities that are geared towards directors. And maybe you can get in tune a little bit with some of the conversations that they're having, and finding out if that's something you want to be involved in, because you then would be having those conversations. I actually went to the Public Library Association conference in Nashville several months ago, and I attended on purpose a session on middle management, because I just have one middle manager. But I do kind of help other libraries and other library directors and stuff. And I just wanted to have a better understanding of the challenges of middle management. And this was a huge, huge, huge session. There were hundreds of people in this session. And at one point, they asked if there were any directors in the room, and I was the only one who raised my hand. And I felt like such a pariah in there, because they were having these middle management discussions, and a lot of that discussion was kind of, dissing their directors. I'm not taking anything personally, but it was good for me to kind of be a fly on the wall to hear those conversations, because I knew what their concerns were. So try to be a fly on the wall when there's directors around, and see if you can kind of get the inside scoop that way.
Yeah. Or check with some of your directors around your area, or you could check with, like I'm the regional coordinator for the northeast side of Indiana. You might check with your regional coordinator to see if they could put you into contact with some really good directors. We have a lot out there that definitely I would recommend.
Oh,
So,
yeah. And there are some out there who might even be willing to do like a job shadow for half of a day, or something like that. And personally, I would be thrilled if somebody came and asked me about that, because it shows that they've got a passion for the profession, and that they're also being very mindful of the next steps they take, rather than just, it's nobody's in it for the money. I mean, yeah, a director is typically going to make more money, but it's not a super lucrative profession unless you're in a really big system. But probably the bigger the system, the higher the stress level goes too. So um, it's, make sure your heart's in the right place.
we also have, I didn't think about this until just now. When I started this job in 2014, they had us read the new director manual that's on the Indiana State Library webpage. I was floored at how much stuff a director does. I
Hmm.
had been in libraries for 20 some years and had no clue what directors did. So that was an eye opener.
Right. And when you are the director, your staff has no clue about what you're doing. And I think that's something important to remember, because it can oftentimes make us feel unappreciated or underappreciated. But you can't get defensive and go to your staff and be like, well, you have no idea all the things I'm doing. I'm doing this, 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 this. That's not what a good leader is going to do. But sometimes we can just feel like, oh my gosh, I am just swamped, and they have no concept of what I am doing. And that can be a frustration, but it's when you got to check at the door.
Right. Lots of management books out there would be great to read. Maybe we can put a list together and send everybody when we get the recording link. That would be a good thing to do.
Yep. And,
Yeah,
again, too, I
sorry.
just want to say that things are very individual from one library to another. And if you take a position at a library where things had really soured with the previous director, um, that can be a challenge straight away, versus coming into a situation where maybe they love their library director, which can also hold its own challenges, because now maybe you have some big shoes to fill. So it's not like it's going to be a cookie cutter every single place you go. So when you sort of have your eye on a place, definitely make sure that you know sort of what you're getting into in that specific example.
Oh, Deborah's asking, let's see,
I think
can you
maybe she
share that
means the directors.
list of director responsibilities? If we can't do it here, maybe we could send that out later. Um, Someone else asked, what do you do to create employee satisfaction?
So I don't want to start out with negative, but I will say there are some employees who will never be satisfied. And when that happens, that's one of those fires you have to let burn. No matter what you do, some people just aren't going to like the person in charge. Um, so that being said, that doesn't mean you can't keep trying, and that you can really appreciate the people who are, I mean, you have to appreciate everybody and the work they do, but who are a little bit more responsive. So we do just a lot of fun stuff. We do a lot of meals like pitch-ins and things like that. We have what we call a kudos board on our back wall, where if somebody did a really great job or helped somebody out, we put Hey, Carrie, thank you so much for helping me with that patron the other day. Whatever, put something like that up there. We do Secret Santa. My staff loves Secret Santa. They're crazy about it. They want to draw names in like October so they can start planning. So again, that's what works with my staff. It's not necessarily what's going to work with every staff. So getting some kind of a reward or appreciation system there. But then going deeper into the more leadership part of it, don't micromanage your staff. Um, if you hire well and you treat your staff as professionals and they know what they're supposed to be doing, all then you're doing is motivating them and being there when they need you. You don't need to be on top of them all the time. And the more autonomy they have, the more ownership of their ideas and the projects that they can do on their own, the more they're going to feel appreciated. Verbally appreciate your staff, little thank you cards in their mailboxes, or, I found gold stars in my desk when I was cleaning out my desk for our carpet install. And so I hung onto these gold stars for a couple of days and gave them to my staff when they did something great. So just little things like that you can do, but the more leadership aspect of it is to just give them the ownership of their projects and really make an effort to listen and to give them what they want. I mean, in my building project situation, I had everybody at the table. What do you want? You want that chair? You got it. You want an extra door there? We'll make that happen. You want a desk that raises and lowers so you can stand and sit down? Let me see if I can get that for you. So if you think it's a reasonable request and you can accommodate it, do it.
Okay, probably have time for a couple more questions. I see another one. Do you have performance reviews and how do you run that process?
I do have performance reviews. I change my process every year just to try to keep it fresh, but it is a formal process, and that we sit down and we do meet one on one to go over some kind of document that is, in writing. Now, I don't like to do scores because I feel that those can be really internalized by overachievers. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Those can be really internalized by overachievers. So if somebody got all the top scores, but then one they missed a point, that's what they're going to focus on, is that one where they missed a point. So I don't like that method. I like to do just more casual conversation. Talk about what's going well, what's not going well, how they felt they contributed over the past year, what they think they can help do in the future, contribution wise. Because my evaluations this year kind of were during COVID, they weren't evaluations. It was just like, how are you doing? How are you holding up? How can I help you? And then I usually meet a second time in the year as what I call just touching base meetings, which is sort of, I say, I'm just checking in with your work life and making sure that everything is going well, seeing if they're on
Okay, I
schedule
think
with
this will,
their projects and their goals, if they had anything like that.
oh, sorry about that. It's hard asking questions when we're both
Oh,
in
that's
two
fine.
different locations. One last question. How have you adapted those kinds of fund-based methods with current circumstances, with probably the COVID and
Uh,
keeping everybody separate?
yeah. So my teen librarian, he got us set up on Discord. And so this is how we're communicating. I know a lot of people are using Teams and different things. And we have a lot of fun with that. So we have channels on Discord where there's different topics of conversation. And many of them are work related, obviously. But then there are some that aren't. There's what are you eating? Or there's what are you watching or listening to? And a lot of times people are just putting in funny memes, or they're taking pictures of their lunch, which might be absolutely pathetic, and kind of getting a chuckle out of that. So just staying in casual communication, making sure that we aren't always just talking work every time. We have done a virtual tea time because we have tea time every Thursday, and now that we can't get together, we had virtual tea time. So we all joined a Zoom meeting and had tea and just visited and didn't talk about work. And then we also did a quiz on what was that called? Jackbox, I think. And it was super fun. Not everybody did it. It wasn't even really a quiz. It was just games, and probably 8 people participated when we did it. So it's certainly not mandatory, but it was super fun. So just adapting to doing more stuff online. But now we're back in the building, and we have a building project, so people are pretty excited about that too.
Okay, this now I promise that we have to have this as the last question because we're running out of time. And it's a really
Fine.
great one.
I'm glad we're getting questions because I left time.
Yeah, how as you a director, how as you as the director practice self-care as it seems you are always taking care of your staff? How did you find the balance?
That's a good question. I'll admit I'm not really doing real well with that right now. I have not had a day off since everything started with COVID. I was scheduled to take a vacation the week of March
Okay.
16th, and that was the week we closed, and I didn't get a vacation. So, and I find that I've become a workaholic because now I'm working from home all the time. Um, but under normal circumstances, and how I hope to evolve back into, um, it's making sure that I'm carving out that time when I am simply not available. When I'm in a rehearsal and I'm not available, I can't feel guilty about that. I need to feel good about that. Trying to take vacations. My husband and I would like to go to Vegas. Unfortunately, we're not going to Vegas anytime soon, but we usually go a couple times a year. I have a dog and I pet the heck out of her all the time and like to walk her and get outside. So it's just kind of going back to the simpler things in life, having nice meals and watching the TV shows that I get pleasure out of and just getting back to reality, but making sure that there's time when I am completely checked out is the key.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Lynn. This has
My
been
pleasure.
invaluable. Thanks to everybody being on here. I'm just going to say here at the last, as a reminder, if you are watching an archived version of this presentation, information on how to obtain your LEU is in the video's description in YouTube. So we'll now stop the recording.